Geek Therapy Radio.
Welcome to Geek Therapy Radio. I am, of course, your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger, and it's after midnight here in Houston as I'm recording this. I struggled today with what I wanted to talk about. Of course, there's all sorts of cool tech news and, cool geeky things that have crossed my periphery that would be fun to talk about. But I decided that I want to talk about what's just weighing most on my heart right now, because one of the aspects of Geek Therapy Radio is that I can level with all of you, and of course you can level with me if you ever want to send me an email, geektherapy@iheartmedia.com. But if it's one thing that I do on the show, it's that I don't stray away from, or I try not to stray away from being an open book for everybody listening, up into a certain point. I mean, I'm not going to live my entire life out through a speaker, through a microphone. There are some things that I would obviously keep private, as anybody should. It's always kind of strange to me, and maybe it's just me as a person, as an individual, when people seem to live their entire lives out on social media, on YouTube. They get very, very personal with things, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but there's something. I'll give you a for instance here. As you know, my wife and I recently bought our first house. And there are lots of sweet moments that come along with purchasing your first home. We were married earlier this year in March, and one of the things that I wanted to keep private were those little intimate moments. For example, carrying her across the threshold. That is something that I didn't want a camera out for. I didn't want any pictures of it to go up on Instagram or Facebook. I didn't want to make a YouTube video about it. There are certain tender moments like that where naturally I would want to keep it. It's just something special for my wife and I. It's just a moment that nobody else sees but us two. It's our own little place in the universe. And I think that's important, and I know that this is kind of, it's common. This is status quo for most people who don't have a huge social media presence. Obviously, people who don't have a YouTube channel or a podcast or a radio show or anything like that. Yeah, well, most of what you do is private. But at the same time, there are people out there who post every little nugget and detail of their life onto Instagram, for instance. You go somewhere special, every single part of it is up on Instagram. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's cool to share neat places and neat experiences with your friends and family. But if it's, to me, I just don't want to do that all the time. If I go someplace cool, yes, I will share some things about it. But for instance, wife and I went to Portugal for our honeymoon. It was great. It was romantic. The weather was absolutely perfect. Portugal, we went to Lisbon. It was just gorgeous. It was such a perfect honeymoon. But we made it a point, both of us made it a point that we weren't going to spend every day updating social media, even just to tell family, oh, here's how we're doing, and live through us vicariously. No, we were going to sit out on that balcony. We were going to enjoy ourselves and just be alone, just be with ourselves. That's not to say we didn't put some things up there, especially after the fact, but there are things you want to keep personal. But again, that's up to everyone's personal taste. But here on Geek Therapy Radio, sometimes I like to just open the book. I like to open my book and I hesitate to call it commiserate, but sometimes it is commiserating, because if I feel comfortable enough to put that out there, I know somebody else has to be going through something similar, or has been through something similar, or maybe you feel connected to me in some sort of camaraderie with me that like I preach on the show, you're not alone, because you really aren't alone. And that's why I share some of these intimate details with you, as I am comfortable with and as I see serving a means to the end to remind everyone that we're all geeks about something and that you are worthy of love. And it's something that I have to remind myself of too. And that's really what I'm getting to today. And that is what I wanted to talk about today, is that I, over the past few days, have struggled with, not that I don't think I'm worthy of love at all or anything like that. I'm not depressed or anything. But I'll kind of cut to the chase here. Sometimes I don't feel like what I'm doing and what I'm putting out into the universe is good enough by my standards. I see, and I'm just letting you behind the curtain like I do. One of the joys and privileges of doing this show is that I get to talk to all sorts of fascinating people and experts in their field. I get to talk to the best of the best in science. I have yet to release my quantum computing episode. I'm still editing that together. If you're wondering where the big podcast was this week, it's because the broadcast didn't air because it got preempted by sports. So I didn't put out a new broadcast since it wasn't going to be broadcast anyways. I figured, well, people probably haven't heard last week's episode, so I'll just let that air again whenever it rejoins from college football. So I didn't put out the podcast on Friday. I'm working on it. It will come out. Don't worry. I'm still releasing the podcast version of it. But I'm talking to scientists about quantum computing and with the current state of quantum computing, the future of quantum computing, what quantum computing could possibly impact in day-to-day life when it does enter the fold in earnest, when it does become a part of our daily lives. So just a brief, for instance, weather prediction, pharmaceuticals, stock markets, all things that quantum computing is going to have a major impact on. AI, all that kind of cool stuff. But the point is, I get to talk to experts in their field. So I talk to this doctor who has a PhD in computer science, or whatever he's got his degree in. Last year I talked to Lights. She's a very prolific artist, musician. I've had a few musicians on. I've had, Austin Evans, James Rolfe, the angry video game nerd, the 8-bit guy, Clint from Lazy Game Reviews. Like, I have very established people that are successful at what they do on the show, and it's an absolute privilege to talk to them and pick their brains, and even more of an honor to call them friends and have their respect in what I do, despite, and I'm already being therapeutic with myself here, have their respect for what I do despite what I'm doing currently being so much smaller in terms of scale and reach as what they're doing. For instance, James Rolfe, how many subscribers does he have on YouTube? How many his videos regularly get hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of views and reach? Austin Evans is another one in a similar boat. So it's cool to have their support, but at the same time, and here is the real meat and potatoes, as I like to say, the meat and potatoes of what I'm feeling. And thank you, by the way, listeners, for being for listening to me ramble here on the therapist's couch to you. It means a lot. What I struggle with is that I've been doing this show for 2.5 years at least. I think spring 2016 is when I first... Was it 16? Spring of 2016, or was it 17? I forget. It's at least 2.5 years that I've been doing this. And I'm very analytical to a degree with what I put my mind to, whether it's building something or doing something creative. I mean, to me, really, it's one and the same thing. But one of the creative parts of this radio show, broadcast, and YouTube stuff that I'm doing is the business side of it. So I get very much satisfaction out of setting up meetings with clients and potential sponsors, and sometimes they go well, sometimes nothing comes out of it, but putting myself out there and doing it, thinking about the law of averages, that the only way to actually get the yes is to make sure you go through 100 no's first, but you have to put yourself out there, you have to set up those interviews to get the no's, because without those no's and o's, you will not ever get the yes. So I think about the numbers, and there's therapy in the numbers. I often said my two biggest influences in life are Jesus and Data from Star Trek. So I try to, I have a huge heart. I wear my heart on my sleeve sometimes, and I'm very affected by my emotional state going into things. But at the same time, I try to glean from Spock and from Data. Be analytical, be logical about things. Try to strip emotion out of it. Usually my rule of thumb is that the more emotional I get about it, the more logical I should be about it, the more I should remove emotion from the situation. So if I'm all fired up about something, I'm all depressed about something, remove the emotion and look at it logically. Just black and white, pen and paper, just look at the numbers. Where am I really at despite the emotion? And oftentimes, that works for me. But then sometimes, like the reason I'm doing a podcast about this today is that I think I'm 2.5 years into it. The analytical, logical side of me says any sort of new business venture takes, really the average is like 3 or 4 years, 5 years before it turns a profit. And I'm just trying to see how 2.5 years into it, if there's any promise of this turning a profit. And I don't mean that I'm trying to get rich off of this, but I am trying to make a living. And if I can make a living by helping people in some sort of way and through a creative outlet, then I've made it. I don't need to have $1 million. I don't need to have a huge house. As a matter of fact, I have discussed with my wife, I've told, even all through my life, I've settled on this conclusion that even if I was a millionaire, if I was a billionaire, that the last thing in the world I would want is a huge house. I've lived in a, well, for most people, a huge house. It was like 5,000 square feet, 5,500 square feet growing up. But I was in a family of 7, and I know there's a lot of people thinking right now, 5,000 square feet is nothing. Well, really it is nothing. 5,000 square feet, if it's just a married couple and 1 or 2 kids, that's way too much square footage. That's a lot of house to keep up with. So I always thought to myself, even if I was a billionaire, why would I want a big, massive, lonely, cold, drafty mansion? Nothing about that appealed to me. I'd rather have a small, cozy, manageable house. I don't see my life getting much different. Let's say that my big break comes tomorrow and somebody offers me a lucrative 6-figure deal on something for the next 5 to 10 years guaranteed. I mean, let's just say I get my break tomorrow and I'm set. My career is set, and let's say I navigate it perfectly the entire time until I retire. So I'm making good money for the next 30 years or so. And I look around and I say, you know what, honey, we can really afford a much better house than this. I wouldn't want to. I'm very happy with the house that we moved into. That's not to say, obviously, I wouldn't make improvements. I would improve this room that I'm in right now, or build onto the house to have an actual dedicated workspace, recording studio set up. Just a modest size, is a normal, like a big bedroom. But you get what I'm saying. Modest with how I spend the money, modest with how I'm living. Being flashy doesn't appeal to me. I told, as my mind wanders here, when I was dating after my divorce in 2015, 15. I think it was finalized in 16. I was on a date with a young lady, and as most of you know, I do have a 2010. It's almost 10 years old by now, but it was and still is a nice Audi. It came as part of an inheritance when my dad died, and the only reason I got it was because at the time I was engaged to my first wife, and I thought things were pretty set, and I thought, okay, you know what? If I splurge on this a little bit here, it's okay. I would never do it if I was single. I thought I've already got the girl who I thought at the time. I'm already kind of established, and so I think it'd be okay to kind of go for this, splurge for this a little bit. But it's not something I would do otherwise. So I was telling the girl I was on a date with at the time, I said, sometimes I wish I could just push this car off a cliff. Now, I really like my car a lot. I like my daily driver. It's in the shop right now getting a new starter. But it's not the type of vehicle I would have purchased for myself if I was single. To be more succinct, I would have not purchased a flashy car to impress anybody. I would have not bought an expensive, flashy car to impress women. Does that make sense? Because I always thought it was, douchey. And I don't like to throw people under the bus or make them feel ashamed. Let's say you're a young guy, you're 25 years old, you just landed a great gig out of college, lucky you, and now you went out and bought a BMW 3 Series, and now you go to the clubs every Friday, Saturday night, you're just young and stupid, because really we are young and stupid at some point in our life. But you're going through that phase where you bought the fancy car and you're trying to impress the ladies, and then you realize rather quickly over the next few years that is really, really ungratifying. That you did what you thought you were supposed to do, that the media was, putting out in front of your face, buy this BMW or you can't get the woman, that you fed into that bullcrap, and now you realize how empty it is, how empty your life is. At the time, it might feel great. I'm not doubting that young 20s and you're making money isn't going to feel great if you're lucky enough to be in that position, but there comes a time where it becomes shallow. It's kind of the Fonzie paradox. The Fonzie was cool, but you don't want to see a 50-year-old Fonzie. 20-year-old Fonzie, awesome, sexy, cool. 50-year-old Fonzie, sad. So even if we do go through a phase in our life where we try to be the cool guy with the car, we get older and you realize it is not all it's cracked up to be. So why am I saying all this? And yes, really, it's just my mind wandering, but I'm hoping that people will listen to that you might be listening to this and you might kind of relate to it. But to kind of bring it all back around, I still struggle with, like I said, not self-worth, but 2.5 years into this, thinking I don't deserve a break. A break is not guaranteed in the first place. It's a struggle not to feel ashamed that I deserve anything. It's almost like I don't want to. I do want to get it, and I want to work for it, and I want to earn it, but I don't want to hope for it. Does that make sense? I feel like there's so much more going on in the world. People fighting for their rights in Hong Kong not to be oppressed by the communist Chinese government. Starving children, people with disease. We still got people fighting Ebola in 2019. We're still having debates as to whether or not vaccinations are legit. Or should I vaccinate my kids? And there's kids growing up with disease and just horrible things. So I feel like, well, in a world like that, where do I get off hoping for success. And I try to justify it, and maybe it is right. Maybe there's nothing wrong with justifying it in this way, but I justify it with, well, if I just had the resources, then I could help more of those people. When the reality is I can help as many people as I can, even if I was poor. And I'm not far off from being poor. Now, I've got enough to get by. I'm looking at a rack full of equipment that I record podcasts on that I've accumulated over the years. Drinking orange juice. I have a refrigerator full. I'm not going to starve. Got a pantry full of stuff. So by all means, and I'm able-bodied, I have my health, and that's the most important thing in the entire world is I have my health. If you have your health, you can be a big help to this world. So is it an excuse that I don't help more people because I say to myself, I don't have the means? And if I just had the means, then I would help all the more people. I think in another telling way, and I'm going to get spiritual just for a second. I never preach on this show, but I don't stray away from the fact that personally I am Christian. I have no problem with anybody else's faith. I have friends, dear, dear friends that are atheists, Buddhists, Hindu, Jewish, all different faiths, all different lifestyles, all different races, gay, straight, black and white, bisexual, lesbian, whatever, LGBTQ, all of this stuff. If I'm forgetting some syllables, or if I'm forgetting some letters in the acronym, I apologize. I'm cool with everybody. But if asked, I will not deny my faith. So I set that up to say this. This is huge. This is something that I think a therapist would dig into. I have a very hard time, a very, very hard time, and I cannot remember if I have ever done this, but I cannot ever remember saying a prayer for my own benefit. Oh my gosh, and I know that can sound kind of douchey to say. I only pray for other people. I only pray for those who are sick. Or I only pray for a tortured world. I never pray for my own benefit. A lot of people might pray for a new house, pray for a car, pray for financial security. It's like I can't ever pray for that. And that's one thing that prayers are for. Not pray, hey, please God, make me rich. Nothing like that, but I have this barrier in my brain and in my heart that I can't pray for a meeting to go well. I do pray for wisdom before I go into meetings, or I do meet with clients or anything like that, potential clients. I do pray for wisdom, but I don't say, you know what, God, you know what, this time, if you just make things go really well, like if you not go well by your terms, but go well by my terms. Go well by my vision for what I think going well means. Going well means that I shake hands with this person and we agree to a 4-digit deal on whatever. That'd be my idea of good terms, or 5-digit deal, 6-digit deal. That's my idea of what works out best. I can't, it's like I can't pray for my own well-being. There's a barrier. I'm not saying that I've never, ever done it. Surely there must have been a time. I remember saying a prayer one time, as many of us have, that we're so sick with the flu, you're just like, God, either cure me now or kill me now. One or the other. In the next 5 minutes, please put me down to death or cure me instantly. I have prayed that prayer before, where you're just like, I don't understand how my own human body can feel so terrible. Like, how can little germs make me feel this bad to where I'm legitimately asking God, kill me or spare me? in the next 5 minutes. I either want to be dead or I want to feel perfect again. I don't have any more strength in me to try to recuperate or fight this thing off. Kill me or heal me. I have prayed that prayer before. But I've never prayed the prayer of, hey, can I have a big break today? Can someone notice what I'm doing and bankroll this thing? Even though what I'm thinking of future children and the well-being of, my future family, and for my wife works. She's a strong, independent lady who don't need no man. So I'm honored to be her husband. She's going to work. It doesn't matter how much money I make. She's still going to work. She's still going to earn her own. We're a team in this, and we're partners, as every marriage should be. But I do have the luxury that I don't have to earn because I'm with somebody who believes I'm the only one who should be earning. Doesn't matter how much I earn, she's going to earn herself. That's who she is, and I freaking love her for it. And I adore her for it, actually. Honored that she's my wife. So anyways, it's been a while. I've just been rambling on, but I hope it's been helpful for me. Whether it's helpful for you, I hope so. But it's been helpful for me just to get that off my chest, that I can't help but sometimes compare myself to others' success. And what category does that fall under? Is that envy or jealousy? Because there is a difference. I guess it would be envy. Because I don't want them not to be successful. I take great joy in their success because I believe they're good people and I know how hard they work, and I'm overjoyed that, for instance, Chris Henderson of Hendy Amps, he's been on that. He's been working with electronics and on that path for quite a while. Well over a decade of blood, sweat, and tears and electricity to go into building that business up. So I am ecstatic. But at the same time, and I'll use that as an example, I'll use Chris as an example, I think, what if I had focused on one thing for 10, 15 years? What if I latched on to this radio thing, broadcasting 10 years ago? And yes, I did start at iHeartMedia. It was Clear Channel back then, 10 years ago. But it takes time to work your way up. And I thought, what if I just started a podcast in 2009? Where would that podcast be by now if I had started this thing 10 years ago? Was I focused too much on polishing my chops to be a good broadcaster, to enunciate and have people understand what I'm saying to them over an AM radio broadcast? I think that skill has benefited me, but it wasn't entirely required. And it's something that would have come naturally. So I just think to what if I wasn't so ADD about stuff? What if I just focused on one avenue of study? What if I did become an electrical engineer? That was an interest to me at one point, and I did buy a bunch of math books and textbooks. I was going to teach myself math again so that I'd be ready for calculus when I got to math. Electrical engineering degree is very heavy on the math, naturally. So what if I had pursued that? And that's something that I thought I might want to do in 2011. I had that thought. We're in 2019 now. I would have had my degree by now, and I've been making very, very, very good money as an electrical engineer. Is that something that maybe you listening struggle with? We're so into so many different fascinating things that while I am studying for electrical engineering at the time, I get distracted by something else creative, or something else catches my fancy. Whatever it is, and it's a beautiful thing to be so interested in the world, but I can't help, and everything that the world and the universe has to offer, all the fascinating things, and that's, my attempt has been to channel that energy being fascinated by everything into a show that allows me to explore everything and hopefully help other people to explore the things that I find interesting, that maybe it might catch somebody out there on some subject that I bring up, and they latch onto it, and they become the success story that they say, Johnny, I was listening to a podcast of yours a few years ago, and it inspired me to go into school for electrical engineering, and now I'm making $250,000 a year, and I'm doing very well, and I'm very happy. And you're the one who inspired that. You're the one who triggered that little change of heart. I would be ecstatic. Absolutely ecstatic. Maybe if there's some kid who listened to this and they got interested in rockets, they were so inspired to try a new thing that they went to the hobby shop and they bought the rocket fuel and they built their first little rocket that they bought at Hobby Lobby. And now, they grow up and they go to school and they become literal rocket scientists, and they are part of the team that puts the first people on Mars. I could only hope that I would have that kind of impact on people's lives. And I just remind myself, and I promise I'm wrapping it up, remind myself that that's the goal of all of this. And I always bring myself around to, don't be so harsh on yourself for not seeing the financial return out of this yet. But part of me, it has to just cling to the hope that I might inspire somebody to do something great in their lives. Not just great in their lives, at the very minimum, keep them from doing something unthinkable to themselves and carrying on for another day, which turns into an entire fulfilled life. I mean, that's what I'm really trying to do. I hope what I'm doing helps people, and I hope that I'm not being a hypocrite sometimes. But again, that goes all the way back around to having a hard time for wishing success on myself. It's like, I say all these nice things. I say that you're worthy of love, and I believe it all. Of course, absolutely, I believe it all. You're worthy of love. You're worthy of giving love. You're worthy of receiving love. We're all geeks about something. Embrace your inner geek. Be good to yourselves and others. All of that, I believe it from the bottom of my heart. That's why I say it every time. But then I feel guilty for comparing myself to other success. Like they've been putting effort into it, and it's worked out for them, and I've been putting effort into what I'm doing, but I can't see that it's worked out yet. Still living paycheck to paycheck. That's my struggle. That's my struggle today, and it felt good to get it off my chest. Everyone has these preconceptions. It is so much easier to tell people how impossible, quote unquote, things are. And that's how this is all therapeutic for me. I just venting about it, talking about it is reminding me of these things. That's helping me and hopefully helping somebody else listen. Everyone in the world around you will tell you how impossible it is to attempt whatever you're trying to attempt. You have to take whatever tidbits of good advice that person has, but you can't listen to how impossible it is. It's so much easier just to say, oh, what you're attempting is impossible. Well, plenty of people do attempt impossible things, and we go to the moon, and we treat cancer, and we invent the radio. We invent the internet, TVs, satellites, spaceships, electric cars. All of those things were impossible. It took one idiot. It took several idiots over the decades, over the centuries to say, yeah, I hear you say it's impossible, but I'm going to try this stupid impossible thing anyways. And we get one small step for man and a giant leap for mankind out of those who attempt the impossible. Sometimes you chip away at the impossible one step at a time, but there's always going to be those who don't, complaining about those who do. Does that make sense? The audacity of you actually trying something is going to piss people off. But you got to do it. Got to do it, and I'm sorry to say, sometimes you got to grow a thick skin. Not everyone is out to insult you. Not everyone is out to tear you down. They will try to say things to take you off your path. You gotta have some thick skin about it. Sometimes you gotta toughen up sometimes about it. Persevere. Put some distance between you and whatever thing someone said to trigger you. You know what? I'm gonna take a couple days away from this. Put some distance between me and that triggering thing, and I'll be good. So I know that me telling you all this about what I'm struggling with, I'm going to have to put some distance between me and my own self-doubt, is what it really amounts to. Self-doubt. I have to remind myself, and I'm going to wrap it up here. I'm going to remind myself that I am worthy. That I'm worthy of love. I'm worthy of giving love. I'm worthy of receiving love, even if there's little demons in my head that says, you freaking hypocrite. You had an angry thought about someone the other day, and you go on your radio show and you tell people that they're worthy of love when you yourself have thought bad about someone who didn't use a blinker or whatever, or called them stupid in your head, or assume that they're idiots. You don't know what that person's going through, and that could be a cancer patient. That could be someone going through a really rough time in their life. Maybe they're just momentarily lost in life. Maybe they've lost their rudder a little bit, which it makes sense if they didn't use their blinker and you're just drifting across lanes. Yeah, that person might be a little bit rudderless right now. Either way, I prejudged, and I feel guilty when I prejudge. So it makes me feel guilty sometimes when I say, you're worthy of love. You're worthy of giving and receiving love, because I'm human, and I've had bad thoughts about others, or at least not such encouraging thoughts. I don't want to kill anybody. I don't wish anybody dies, anything like that. But man, that person must be an idiot, and then I feel real bad, because that's not the impact I'm trying to leave on the world. But I am human. You know I'm human. I don't think anybody listening to me right now assumes anything less, that I'm somehow more virtuous than anybody else. The most audacious thing that I say each week is that even despite our inequities, we're still worthy of love. Despite my inequities, that I am still worthy of love. And I thank anybody who's listened. What are we going? Oh my gosh, 50 minutes. I've almost been rambling for an entire hour. It's 1:11 in the morning. I need to go to bed. Thank you for listening. You are worthy of love. You're worthy of giving love. You're worthy of receiving love. And I guess that's it. Thanks for listening, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Have a great one.
Geek Therapy Radio, Saturday night at 10 on KPRC 950. Or listen anytime on our iHeartRadio app.